Nakul, hi, good to have you with us. How have you been?
Yeah, good to see you, Ashu, after a long time. Yeah,
It's
COVID.
been a long time. A long time. It's been a long time. But Nakul, this is an exciting session, right? I've been looking forward to our discussion, right, at Asiatic Journal, and that's largely because you've been solving for a very different market, right? A market that existed, right? No, necessarily nobody institutionalized this market, but you've really come up and institutionalized this market, and more importantly, you are kind of solving for India, Bharat, right? Which is and there is everybody who's been talking about Bharat, right? I think, especially in a post-COVID world, right? Bharat has become a very, very, sexy opportunity, if I can call it that way.
Yeah,
And that's largely because the dichotomy that existed across markets is kind of diminished, right? And I would love to, through this course of session, right? I'd love to discuss many of those aspects with you, and a lot of these things that you've built for India, right? There's some beautiful product consistencies that you've built within the entire offering, right? I've had the opportunity of knowing a lot of this at a personal level, but I'd love to cover this through the course of the session. But before we do that, I'd love you to take us through a quick round of introduction about yourself, and then from there we start the session.
sure. So, hi everybody. I'm Nakul. I am one of the co-founders of Cashify, and Cashify is India's second largest second-hand phone. Oh, sorry, Cashify is India's largest second-hand phone company. Uh, yeah. So, and we are proud of it, right? We do about 125,000 phones a month, and we serve the people, as you said, the Bharat, where people who can't afford phones or new phones, we serve them.
Very interesting. Nakul, what was happening before this, right? I mean, you came out of MDI, right? You straight got into Cashify, or was there something that you were doing, right? Tell me a little
No,
more about the Cashify journey. I mean, how did Cashify happen, right? I'm sure there are a lot of those moments that come in an individual's journey, right, where he or she questions their role, right, and their existence. I'd love to know a little more about that.
yeah. So I think one of the most interesting thing which happened to me personally is I passed out of college in 2009,
Right.
right? And 2009 being a wonderful year, had no job
Right.
because there was a financial crisis, companies were going down, countries were going down,
Right.
and yeah, so it was a very interesting time, and that's what really pushed me into entrepreneurship. I think,
Right.
when you are in college, everybody's thinking, yeah, once I get 3-4 years of work experience down the road, I have some money, I'll
Right.
start my own thing. But then 2009 happened, and we have nothing to lose, right?
Right.
We were getting shitty jobs, and it's better just to throw yourself in the ocean and see if we can build something.
Right.
So that's how the thought of and doing ourselves something in 2009 came. So me and my business partner Mandeep,
Right.
both 2009 batch.
Interesting.
He was from NITI, I was from MDI,
Right.
and we said, okay, let's do something. And we had a bunch of ideas, right?
Right.
Um, from a sandwich shop to an event management. Yeah, because again, we did not know people who had, and at that time it was not even sexy. So
Right.
things were not written about. We didn't know the Silicon Valley kind of culture, where we were,
Right.
or vision was very one dimensional, where we were thinking, hey, get into do engineering, do MBA, get into a sales job, and your sales job is going to be and which should ideally lead to a PNG or an HUL.
Right.
That was the dream. Um, so, but that did not happen, and we said, let's make our own dreams. And yeah, so we had these bunch of 10 ideas, and then when we start really thinking about doing them and executing them one by one, those were so shallow ideas. When you started getting into it, you realize that they had no meat. For
Right.
example, we when we started thinking about the sandwich shop, we said, okay, how do I differentiate myself from a Subway
Right.
or even the uncle who's making sandwiches on the road, right? So there has to be, from the uncle, I have to have better hygiene, right? I
Right.
have to have better, equipment, branding, those kind of things, all the MBA stuff, right? But how do I make the sandwiches taste better? Because
Right.
it has to be a repeat business, and uh, and then we realized there was no strength of ours which would really we could apply there. We were not cooks, huh? We were not taste masters.
Right.
And we did all that. We went home. We went to different chefs, bakers, tried to learn from them. Come home, cook sandwiches, and invited all our friends and said,
Interesting.
"Hey, would you pay for it?" And it's like, "No, we won't pay for this."
Right.
We very soon realized that a lot of our ideas were unfeasible.
Right.
Um, but one interesting thing which happened to us is Mandeep was from Faridabad, I was in Gurgaon, and we used to see waste all around us.
Right.
And if you've ever been to the Gurgaon Faridabad highway, there's a huge waste plant.
Yes.
And we used to see all that, and we used to see everywhere there's so much rubbish, and it's free, right? And if we can somehow use this rubbish, convert it into something valuable, uh, that's where a business could be made.
Right.
Right. So that was a fundamental part of it, that hey, my input is going to be free. Hence,
Right.
even if I do any value add, and I'm able to make some profit out of it.
Interesting.
We started from that journey, and uh, because we did not have money and we did not have an idea of venture capital investment kind of things, so we said, okay, what is the idea which would take least money, and which was purely basically consulting.
Right.
Right. Now consulting, why consulting? Because we were both MBAs and people were willing to entertain us when you say
Interesting.
you are an MBA. And then we got lucky. So we
Right.
were able to get 3, 4 consulting projects on waste management. There were no experts in waste management in India. So we pretended to be one, uh, and kept reading Wikipedia of understanding what exactly it is.
Right.
And so for the first 2 years, we ran a waste management consulting firm,
Interesting.
right? And luckily, we got a contract with Nokia. So
Wow.
Nokia at that time was market leader, and they wanted to run a initiative where they wanted to collect old phones from consumers
Right.
and send it to recycling as a CSR initiative.
Interesting.
So they hired us as consultant, and basically what they got was 2 young legs
Right.
who would do all the running around for them. But we were really grateful to them. That's where we learned everything from
Right.
basic, understanding how supply chain works in India, how the consumer thinks. For example, at that time we were doing, you donate your old, you throw your old phone to us, and we'll plant a tree for you.
Right. Wow.
And you know, and then they spent a whole bunch of money to get Shah Rukh Khan to promote it, right? So if you had spent the money you had given to Shah Rukh Khan, you would have got more phones
Absolutely.
without branding. But
Right.
again, the objectives of the organization were different. The company was different. So all those kind of. So we did that for 2 years. We got a contract with HP. We were trying to
Interesting.
recycle their printer cartridges, which was a
Right.
waste data. We did a project for Indian Railways. We were trying to figure out what waste Shatabdi and what was the other train name?
Rajdhani.
Rajdhani is
Right.
getting, and how can we utilize that? So what materials should we use in catering, so that those materials could be recycled, and hence the
Interesting.
overall cost burden to the railways go down. So
Right.
very very interesting stuff. But we soon realized consulting is just going to be more theory, less practical, because you're going to give advice, and it's up to the client to do what they want to do, right?
Right.
In most cases, they were not doing what we wanted to do. So we said, yeah, love, and we were like killing inside, yeah, we can't do anything, right?
Right.
In the end, in 2011, we decided, okay, बहुत हो गई consulting. So we set up a recycling plant in Faridabad,
Interesting.
which would recycle scrap tire and rubber and plastic
Okay.
into fuel oil.
Right.
So it's a process, which is a chemical process called pyrolysis.
Right.
This was a technology that existed, and at that time, because diesel got deregulated, so it just became very interesting and feasible to do.
Right.
So we ran that plant for 2 years, and I think one of the highest point of my career, because if you are able to run manufacturing in India, you can really do anything. Toughest,
Okay, thanks for that honest confession.
no, it's the toughest thing you could do in India.
Right,
From managing labor to managing different government departments, uh, from electricity board to pollution board.
right.
There are loads of things, and there are manufacturing is such that in India, if you even start making a little money, all your neighboring industrial units will start copying what you're
Right.
doing, because nobody is interested in doing their own business.
Right.
So when we started out, we were the first plant of that kind in India. And when we exited in 2013, there were about 850 other plants like us.
Wow.
So you can
Interesting.
imagine the
I
growth
can.
of the industry.
I can.
Yeah. So we realized that, yeah, manufacturing is great fun, but it's
Right.
not scalable. Uh, so we had taken bank loans to set up that whole factory. Again, we didn't have money. The only thing we understood was banks, and we took up working capital loan and capital loan for both machinery and servicing the capital.
Right.
Mm, once in 2 years we paid off the loan, and we realized that we were doing about 10 tons a day,
Interesting.
and if we wanted to go to 100 tons a day, we would have to raise 10 more times of capital.
Right.
Yeah. So it's not a hockey stick growth, right? It's
Right.
a linear curve growth. uh, the amount of money you put, the amount of output you'll get.
Interesting.
And and we realize that it's the wrong kind of business to be in when internet is available, and where in an internet-led business you can grow
Right.
exponentially. So the theory says that you can, with the same amount of capital, you can grow very large, because the distribution becomes through digital means.
Right.
Right? That's the theory, right?
Yeah.
So that's so we sold our plant. We sold a plant to one of our buyers who was buying oil from us, and we made some money and then used that money to start Cashify. So that's kind of the journey. Uh,
Wow. That's been a long journey, Nakul. That's been a long journey, and I think it's had you've been through many of some very interesting and complicated pieces, right? And I think I kind of agree with what you're saying, right? I think manufacturing, while of course we're trying to sort of glorify it, government is trying to sort of make it easy, but I think manufacturing continues to be one of the most challenging pieces. And I think, and I completely agree with what you're saying, right? I think D2C is kind of being celebrated today, but I think it's been an opportunity which has existed for the longest time, right? I think
yeah,
behavioral shifts started to happen very early on. I think we could see it happening from 2010-11, right? I think it was becoming a constant. Much smaller population, of course, because availability was limited. But I think eventually, we're seeing what we're seeing today, right? And
no, I
and
think
exponential growth exists,
there's a lot of change in consumer behavior also over
right?
last one decade, where if you started something in 2010, 11, 12, people who were evangelists or who would be the first one to try out a product
Right.
would be very few, right? But now, after a lot of startups are celebrated and everything, now people want to give startups a try.
Right.
And plus, from an end consumer point of view, even if you are looking at a business partnership, everybody is more open to, hey, I'm open to working with a startup. A
Right.
Reliance is open to working to a startup. Look, they're acquiring companies left, right, center, Reliance and Tata. But if you talk about 6, 7 years ago, they would not be open to do a business tie-up with you, because
Right.
hey, you are a startup and you may die tomorrow. So
Right.
they don't see that business continuity with you. But that's kind of a change which we have seen over some years.
That's very interesting, Nakul. I think there's some very interesting points that you've highlighted, and I'm going to come to some of those points specifically around the consumer behavior, right? And that consumer behavior has changed drastically. But before I do that, right, I'd love to understand, and I'm sure everybody who's going to watch this would love to know, where does Cashify stand today? For example, and I understand, there's some data that you can give out and there's some data that you can't, but I
Mm.
completely leave it to your judgment, right? I'd love to understand, where do you stand today? You
Mm.
have a fairly large setup, right? You are in an offline setting and an online setting. It's a hybrid model that you're following. There's a large sale which is happening from tier 2, tier 3 cities. Just
Mm.
give me a scale of where does Cashify stand today, right? I mean, you're the largest player, I
Mm.
think, hands down, right? I'd love
Yeah.
to understand the scale of operations. How many people? the size of the team, right, and some of the key challenges, right, that have been through the process of building Cashify. I'd love to understand that.
In terms of people, we are about 1,000 odd people right now.
Interesting.
We buy about 1.25 lakh phones every month
Okay.
from end consumer. So if you look at from a D2C approach or direct to consumer approach is more, hey, we help you sell your old phone.
Right.
Because for us, supply is always a bigger challenge.
Right.
In a market like India where price is everything, um, uh, selling second-hand phone is not a really big challenge.
Right.
Because if you look at the Indian telecom market right now, 40% of the user base is still on feature phone.
Right.
And they want to be on a smartphone.
Right.
Because internet affordability, content, right? Everything is available. Everybody is on YouTube right now. Everybody watches, even when you go out, the guards, the maids, the rickshawala,
Everybody.
everybody is watching YouTube.
Right.
So they want better phones, but they can't afford better phones. They aspire to have Apple someday, right? They aspire, so somebody starts aspiring for Xiaomi, somebody starts aspiring for an Apple. Everybody at a different stage in their life, and we make it affordable for them to get what they aspire for.
Interesting.
So what we do is we buy from end consumers and we sell it to a lot of these offline retailers who are in the business of second-hand phones, and they are the ones who contain the end transaction to the end consumer for us
Interesting.
across India.
Fantastic. Rahul, what I understand, right, is that, as a brand, right, and you've taken this conscious call, where you said, you've become, your first possibly leg was that, you became, a player, a platform which could take secondhand back from the consumer, right? So essentially that was your starting point, right? But, you kind of started to refurbish them and start offer them, right? Does that also limits your growth possibility, right? Because we're now kind of entering a very different kind of a phase, right? I mean, Jio's kind of made an announcement where they've said that, listen, we're going to be launching a 3,000 rupee phone or a 4,000 rupee phone or a 5,000 rupee phone, right? And that essentially means that this is going to be like a full stack phone, right? What possibly say Samsung offers, it'll possibly not be up the up the charts, right? But it's going to be a good first functional phone, right? Which they're going to offer, and they're going to bundle up, and they've had a legacy of doing that, right? When Dhirubhai Ambani Pioneer offer came, right, and they kind of distributed phones the way they did. They've done that, right? Do you think the market is going to shift? Is what I understand, right? The consumer behavior, like you said, right? There's a permanent shift which has come in the last 1 year, right? Do you think that's going to be a huge disruption for the market? Do you see it as an opportunity, or do you see it as another critical point which is going to define the root of the industry in a very different way?
I think so. These kind of things happen every year for us.
Right.
I get this question almost every time I'm meeting new investors.
Right.
That you are finished, man. Now Jio has launched a 4,000 phone. Nobody will buy a second-hand phone.
Right.
It does not work like that, right?
Okay.
Jio is just another OEM for me for now, which is going to be a new supply source for me. So when people buy, so first of all, Jio is targeting totally the feature phone market. They are going to make sure that the person who want to spend 2,000 rupees to buy a feature phone now buys a smartphone.
Interesting.
And I'm very happy for that, right? Because then they are enabling them to shift to a smartphone, and then that person will want to aspire for a better smartphone.
Right.
Because in the end, Jio is an entry level smartphone, right?
Interesting.
And so then I come in between, where when he's tired of the Jio phone and he wants to move from a 2,000, 3,000 range to a 4,000, 5,000 range, I am available to offer a second-hand smartphone to them, which has better specs, better, because everybody, when they start using it, the usage only increases. The use case only increases. So that aspiration leg will only go up. And
very interesting.
Jio will also create a new market for me.
Interesting.
When after 1 year, those Jio phones are available to me for second hand, right?
Right.
I'm able to, if Jio is selling for 4,000 right now, I will be able to sell them for 2,000 rupees to the next set of users who can't even afford a Jio phone.
Right.
Right. So my ASPs will go down.
Right. Interesting.
But increase market for me. So for me, it's always a win-win.
Right.
I'll also give you another. you know, it's a little difficult to understand from a phone perspective, but when a Tata Nano came,
Right.
right, the, it doesn't happen then suddenly Maruti 800 second hand stop selling.
Right.
There's a price, there's a customer for every price point,
Right.
and we are a huge country. So,
Interesting.
for example, when we do 1.25 lakh phones, there's hardly anything in the whole sea of phones which are available in India and the market we are trying to capture.
Interesting. Nakul, and I completely agree with what you're saying, right? I think what Maruti very smartly did was that, as soon as Nano came in, they completely shelved 800, right? They actually moved to an Alto, right? Which
Yeah,
was a step above.
above.
And
Yeah.
I think India's, aspirationally India is speaking, right? And I completely understand where you're coming from. So, and this is possibly, while there could be naysayers, but this is possibly the best thing that is happening for you, right? Because as soon as that player shifts from, a feature phone to an entry level smartphone, I think the next layer of aspiration, a level of aspiration, is going to be to have a slightly more smarter phone, right? With better RAM, better uh,
Battery.
battery, right, and so on and so forth, right? And eventually, uh, you know, they're going to be Apple aspirational, consumers, and so on and so forth, right? So I think it just opens up the opportunity for you. But Devil, what I want to understand in particularly, right, in this conversation, right, is that your growth is a function of how many second hands can you absorb, right? I want to understand, what kind of a churn is happening in India, right? I mean, what are the numbers that we're kind of churning out? There are numbers, new phone numbers that are out there, right? But I want to understand from the second hand standpoint, right? What are the numbers that are getting churned out, right? What percentage of the market do you own right now? And second, I want to understand the split between, say, urban markets that you're selling in and the Bharat market that you're selling in, right? To get a better understanding of the larger numbers that you've given out, which is about 1.25 lakh phones that you're selling, right? I want to understand that in this context.
Yeah. So from a market sizing in India, about 130 40 million odd smartphones are sold every year.
Okay.
New smartphones.
Right.
We and it's a back of the end calculation. I don't have any reports or
No,
anything,
sure. Right.
right? But we estimate there are about 50 million second-hand handsets which are traded in every year.
Okay.
Average life in India is about 16 to 18 months
Right.
when they upgrade. So that 50 million is a mixture of what new phone upgrades had happened this year and also
Right.
legacy phones, right? So 1 year old, 2 year old, 3 year old, right? This is the total market sizing here.
Right.
Now, this market is divided into different kind of players, right?
Okay.
First of all, players like us, which are only in this business,
Right.
right? We are one of the organized players. The other organized players are somebody like a Flipkart and Amazon, which offer exchange
Right.
on their platform, right? And they buy directly from consumer, but you have to buy a new phone to do a trade in with them. But again, they are not really into that business. They're again, we are one of their partners, so
Right.
most of their material comes to us again. So,
Right.
yeah, but that's how that works. And then there are other players like OLX, Facebook Market, which are C2C platforms. So
Right.
if you want to sell to me, we can directly do a transaction. So
Right.
some part of the market is C2C, and a large part of the market is on the unorganized retail. So you can go to your local store and you can sell your old phone. You can exchange your old phone. So
Right.
right, what we are trying to essentially do is take market share from two places. One is
Uh-huh.
from offline retail.
Right.
So we are saying, hey, why do you need to go to offline retail and you can do it everything sitting at home? And
Right.
the other, we are raising awareness, and about 50% of the market doesn't sell.
Uh-huh.
I'm 100% sure you would have phones at your home which you have not sold,
Right.
right? Because phones is easy
Right.
to sell because it's a small. For example, you would not forever not sell your car, old
Right.
car, right? Because you don't have space to park multiple cars.
Right.
Phone can fit in a drawer, and the basic psyche is, hey, this could be used as a backup, right, when
Right.
it happens, right? So you start piling up phones in your drawer, which eventually goes to a dump yard.
Right.
What we are trying to educate the customer is you really don't need to do that and get, because earlier the selling process was cumbersome, painful,
Right.
not transparent. We are doing all all those things to make sure that you get your money in hand from your home,
Very interesting.
right? And hence we are encouraging, and the bigger pie for us is that 50% people who are not selling.
Interesting. Well, I want to talk to you about Bharat, right? Because that's a very important segment, right? I think a large part of absorption, in everything secondhand, right? Urban market starts the consumption because the exposure levels have been are largely higher, right? So is disposable income, so is opportunities, right? Tier two usually has become the the kind of the is essentially been the one which has been absorbing a lot of secondhands, right? Be it cars, be it automobiles, be it phones, right? What's been your experience of Bharat, right? And I what I understand particularly is when so I come from a tier two city, right? And I've born and brought up in a tier two city, right? Uh, Tier two operates on a huge trust angle, for example, right? I mean, if you look at, for example, say gold, or if you look at anything that they buy, right, they essentially buy it from, say, the Aurora store or the Sharma store, where the promoters, right? You had a certain relationship and so on and so forth, right? And that still exists, right? It's not something which is going away. Uh, how difficult has been to go out and create that trust, right? Tier two and downwards is what I essentially mean to say, right? Where you have the Samsung of the world who are competing with you, right? How do you position yourself? Do you position yourself as a player who's doing refurbished phones, or do you position yourself as a retailer who is providing you, phones at a better value, right? Does the communication process changes in the sequence of things, or it continues to remain the same, right? What is the positioning there, right? I mean, how do you ensure that trust in the brand comes through? Uh, and this is actually something which leads into my next question, right? Which I will come to. But I want to understand, how's been the journey on catering to Bharat, right? What are some of the complexities that you've dealt with, and how have you chosen to tackle them?
Yeah, so I think for the longest time we were not directly selling to end consumer. We were
Right,
selling to retailers, and we would not give them the brand name, and they would sell it as on their own, because their problem was they did not get consistent supply, and we were
right,
solving for that. But about 1.5 years, we started our own journey of selling to end consumers, and now we have about uh, 80 retail stores across India,
right,
and we also sell through our online store, which are doing great. And
right,
when we started out, for example, if you buy a second-hand phone in Gafar, right?
right,
Uh, you walk into the store, you buy the store, and once you walk out, there is no guarantee.
right,
He would say, hey, once you walk out, even if you walk out 1 minute and your Wi-Fi is not working, you can
right,
come. You can
right.
test as much you want in the store,
Sure,
and right.
right,
That was the market trend, right?
right,
Across. When we came in, we started with 3 months warranty. We said,
right,
you buy a second phone, we give you in a nice packaging. It comes with a new charger cable, because why would you want a used cable charger? They
correct,
would cuts. Those cable and charger would come with their own warranty. In the
right,
phone, we guarantee 1 month, 3 months warranty, right?
interesting,
And when we started out, suddenly the market noticed, right?
right,
And suddenly everybody started out giving, okay, let's give 1 month warranty, let's give.
right,
And in a year, almost everybody started giving 3 months warranty, and then we said, okay, we're going to give 6 months warranty,
interesting,
right? So uh, and this is, we are just doing this to build trust, right? Even
right,
our retail stores, right? In our retail store, we also offer instant repair. So
right,
if you have a second hand phone, we've sold it to you,
right,
you have an issue, you just come to our store, and we will instantly make sure that it's back to working for you. You
interesting,
don't have to, if you are approachable to a retail store, then you don't have to visit a different service center for us.
right,
So these are the aspects, and it's a branded store. Everybody understands that in a second hand space there is no branded entity, and hence
right,
we are able to command a premium for that, which a normal customer wouldn't. Also,
interesting,
there are a lot of aspects in second hand, because for example, somebody may be selling a stolen phone,
right.
uh, or from a source which is not known, right? Those things are very carefully taken care in our aspect.
Very interesting. Nakul, what are some of the things that kind of surprised you, right? I mean, this has been a difficult market, right? And and given what you were doing, right? And tier two constitutes to be a large play for you, right? Tier two and onwards constitutes to be a large play for you, right? What are some of the things that have surprised you, right? Something that you did anticipate and you were like, in a good way, taken aback, right? That wow, this is something which could, you know, this could be something which we should imbibe in our offering, right? What were some of those learnings that you had? I'd love to understand that.
So I
And
think,
I ask you that, and I ask you that. Sorry, and I ask you that because India is a very large market, right? We're a large ship, right? We're complicated at so many levels. It's even impossible to sort of get into that, right, and list them down. But yeah,
yeah. So I think one thing which I always thought, for example,
right,
was that below a certain price point, nobody will buy a second-hand phone,
right,
right? Why would somebody go below 1,000 rupees and yeah, you can buy a new feature phone, right?
right,
But a very surprising thing in India is there is a customer for every price. You
right,
can, you can sell a second-hand feature phone and people
right,
will buy, right? I when my team suggested it, I was like, no, I don't think we should do feature phones, and it's not worth repairing, refurbishing, and
right,
then it's just too much cost. And and we have done programs. We've not continued it because from a financial sense it doesn't make sense. But you can buy second-hand feature phone for 200 rupees and then sell it for 400 rupees, and people will buy. Like, there's unlimited demand.
right,
There was just not enough money to be made. My cost doesn't get met.
right.
Yeah, but so for me, it was very surprising that you can in this country sell anything. The price should be right, and so price by mean value for that price.
Right. Interesting. Which is a region which has surprised you pleasantly?
Pleasantly,
Yes.
I'm surprised with Tamil Nadu always. The quality of consumers are pretty high, right? For example,
Interesting.
when we buy devices, you have to do a self-assessment of the phone,
Right.
and which is an assisted self-assessment. So you have to be honest to yourself and do the assessment, and then our guys come to your home and kind of counter check. Uh,
Right.
we've seen that Tamil Nadu kind of is on the higher range where people don't lie about it. Well,
Interesting.
the rest of the country, yeah, it's almost same.
Interesting. Super. Well, I'm going to move into some of the key enablers that have shaped up, right, in the last 2.5, 3 years, right. And I think financing is something which is kind of I mean, if you look at fintech companies, right, they've completely taken off in a very different way, right. They've enabled, empowered a lot of transaction, right. Something nobody imagined could be possible at the velocity which we've kind of experienced, right. It's been absolutely phenomenal, right. And I think a lot of these companies have actually gone out, ventured out into segments that banks and NBFCs were not necessarily comfortable lending, and they've been able to do it because of the intelligence stacking that they've been able to do, right? Uh, how has that changed the market, right? I mean, in the markets that you're selling, right?
Yeah.
What one percentage of products are you selling on cash vis-a-vis financed? Second, do you think as financing increases, right? What's the growth that you anticipate these regions are going to see, right? Because there's now a lot of that happening in tier two, tier three, right? I mean, it's a lot of fenced financing which is happening, right? B2B trade financing has started to happen in a big way. Bill discounting is happening across tier two, tier three, even at rural levels, right? So a lot of agri-tech financing companies or agri-financing companies that come up, right? They're providing the liquidity. What's your sense of it, right? How do you see one? How have you seen this shift? Again, how do you see the change, right, as we go forward?
Yeah, I think I'll talk about in two parts, right? One
Sure.
is B2B financing, which is trade financing. I think that's been a huge up.
Right.
I've seen it myself, and I think the access to capital. And for example, for these guys also, there was access to capital, but these were zamindar thakurs, right? With
Right.
unreasonable interest rates and disruptive collateral, right?
Right.
So with these organized players coming in, that has changed. We need to educate them more that this is a different, more organized player versus your traditional players.
Mhm.
We still have to earn their trust in terms
Right.
of lending, right? Um, but from a point of consumer financing, right? I think, and this is my personal view,
Right.
we are the whole of all the companies are still targeting those top 50 million kind of users only.
Right.
We have not gone down below because a lot of them don't have enough paperwork which would
Right.
justify those kinds of financing. So I think I hope that as that market starts capping out, people will start going below that,
Right.
and so the fun will happen when we move from the 50 million to that 100 million mark, right? And that's where my major customer base lies, uh,
Interesting.
and not in the top 50 million.
Interesting. But are you partnering with some of them, and are you extending some,
Yeah. So
credit possibility?
yeah. So we have partnered with a couple of them to provide credit financing to our retail partners.
Interesting.
Uh, we have enabled EMI on our online store and everything. But
Interesting.
again, the approval rates are not that high. So my challenge is,
Right.
tools are there, but if I'm not going to enable a majority of my consumer, then uh, it does not excite me.
Right.
For example, if there is a 10% approval rate, so only a
Absolutely.
10% of my total consumer base can really work on it.
Right. So I'm sure you want to see those numbers swell, right? Nakul, I mean, I think no conversation today can happen without COVID, right? Because I think COVID has kind of changed everything that we did, right? The way we consume, the way business was to where it is today, right? I think businesses can choose to continue to operate in a digital environment, right? What I want to understand is, how has COVID changed Cashify, right? Uh, to my senses, right, and something which is more a theory, and I think I continue to sort of check it in terms of its impact on business, right, is that the arbitrage between tier one cities, tier two cities has gone down, right, because everybody has been consuming from the same screen, right. Aspirationally, we're peaking. We haven't been at those numbers the way we are right now, right. There is, of course, a little bit of issue which you kind of alluded to, right, in terms of, say, financing, availability of resources, so on and so forth, right. But aspirationally, we're peaking, right. How has that changed you as a company, right? Today, is there a much larger digital focus that you have vis-a-vis the physical play that you had, because you've been a hybrid player? What's your sense of it internally and on the consumer side, right? How has COVID changed Cashify's journey in the next couple of years?
I think maybe I'll take you to a very interesting story, right?
Sure.
Because of this lockdown, right? A lot of people went from urban centers to more rural centers, and uh, usually they used to stay there for a week or a weekend, right? But they
Right.
stayed there for extended period of time, 6 months, 8 months.
Right.
And what that really, and this is through our surveys and talking to our new consumers,
Right.
it led to they transacting from their hometown.
Right.
And because they're transacting, they're also teaching, learning, training people around them. So the
Right.
locals are saying, oh, okay, you can sell a phone directly sitting from
Right.
home, right? And which enabled new markets for us to open up,
Right.
which we could not read digitally, right? Look, we keep doing digital ads, but I can't really force them to sell, right?
Right.
But if your neighbor is selling and they're satisfied and they say, yeah, this is easy, this is
Right.
simple. They give you money, right? Here, my money's come, right? And then they're like, okay, if he's done it, then I can also do it, right? And suddenly there's a chain effect, and we can see that chain effect happening where tier two, tier three towns are being enabled for us to open up, and the transaction levels have gone up. Or tier two, tier three growth has been almost 1200%
Wow.
compared to urban centers, right? So
Wow.
it's just people. So, and from what we understand from the consumer mindset is just that people see other people doing it around them,
Right.
which makes them more comfortable.
Mhm.
If they can do it, we can do it, and hence we should do it. And it's just growing for us.
Very interesting. So, what are some of the changes that you think are permanent, right? I mean, of course, this is, you've highlighted the transactional, right? You actually highlighted the inhibition is gone, right? Because there were certain people, they showed that confidence, and that had a certain effect on
Domino
their
effect,
immediate
I guess.
circles,
Yeah.
right? But what are some of the things that you think have changed forever, right? I mean, are you seeing people, for example, say a family of four, right? Then it started with one phone, now it's kind of moving to, say, two phones, three phones. I mean, are you seeing a different relationship evolving in the process? What's your take on that?
I think that was happening anyway, right?
Okay.
Look, COVID, no COVID, COVID just accelerated it a little bit. Where
Interesting.
because now the families were not willing to give their kids devices, were forced
Right.
to give devices because the school was to happen through it,
Right.
right? Some of the people were buying two devices because they wanted to keep personal and professional life different. Those kind of things started happening.
Right.
But I think I was foreseeing that anyway happening in couple of years. Now
Interesting.
instead of happening after 4 years, they happen in a space of 6 months.
Right.
Right? So that was the acceleration I saw. But if you look at how OTT is evolving and COVID or no
Right.
COVID, everybody is moving to a personalization, customization of what their preferences, and
Right.
why should they, really compromise their own needs for their needs of others, right? So
Interesting.
if you are a family of four, I want to watch Netflix, you want to watch cricket. Why do we both compromise and watch something
Absolutely.
together where we both can watch different things?
And I think those are some very interesting tendencies that have actually gotten cemented, right? I think around this 1.5 years that we've been through COVID, right? Nakul, what I want to understand one more thing, right? I think procurement for a brand like yourself, right, and a couple of competitors that you have in the market, right, has been a massive challenge, right? A large part of your procurement has continued to happen from, say, the Amazons of the world, right? Uh, you know, what I want to understand is, right, has that changed through this phase? Uh, do you think people are going to upgrade much faster given what we've been through? What's your sense of it, right? Because now the consumption has gone through the roof, like you said, right? People want better performance, right? People want to quickly upgrade. The financing bit is also coming together, right? All of this, I think, is a concoction for growth, right? Are you seeing a change there? People changing, their equipment faster?
I,
What's your sense of it?
I'll give you a surprising fact. India
Sure.
is one of the fastest upgrade market in the world,
Interesting.
right? And say compared to a US, right?
Right.
US average cycle is 24 months to 30 months because it's a
Right.
primarily iPhone dominated market.
Right.
You have to spend $1,000 to acquire a asset, right?
Right.
You really can't afford to do every year.
Right.
India is a $200 market. Is it 10,000 to 14,000 rupees, right?
Right.
The cost of upgrading is not very high,
Right.
right? And as a social symbol, phone is the only asset available to you, right?
Right.
To show your status,
Right.
right? So, for example, if you talk about my organization, and if you start moving from the top team to the team which goes down,
Right.
the cost of phone actually goes higher from bottom up, right? call,
Interesting.
call center people have iPhone 12 13s of the world, and
Right.
as you start going up, for example, I have a 14,000 rupees phone, which
Right.
is I am just I, I don't require it, right?
Right.
Yeah, so and it's just because it's a social status. They right now everybody is in a Uber, Ola. They don't have to own a car, right? The
Right.
only asset which they can openly display and which will
Sure.
show a higher status symbol is the phone,
Right.
right? You can't really, if it's a shirt where the brand is not written on top, you can't really go behind the tag and say, "Hey, I'm wearing."
Right.
But you take out your phone and you say, "Hey, I've got an Apple
Yeah,
something."
I'm doing well in life.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's a big factor.
Interesting. But Devil, how do you? I mean, I think it's a futile question to ask, right? But I would love to understand, right? Which is the phone which is highest in demand, right? I know the answer, right? I think each one of us knows the answer, but I'd love to understand, right? From that to buying, right? Which are the brands which are doing the best, right? In your what you see,
So actually, you can replicate what the new phone market size or share is uh,
right?
to second-hand phone. Xiaomi is number one, Samsung is two. The
Right.
only exception in all the whole thing is Apple, which is number
Right.
three for us. So
Okay.
new phone market, Apple is 2%, while for
Right.
second phone market, it's almost 15%.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that's because the first of all, Apple are expensive phones. So
Right.
most of the people who upgrade from Apple to Apple really actually trade in because
Right.
that makes it very affordable to own a iPhone, right?
Right.
Because there is a higher value retention attached to that phone. A lot of
Interesting.
inventory does come back into the market for iPhone, and there are a lot of people aspiring to buy iPhone, and the entry point for iPhone is about 40,000 rupees. So
Interesting.
second-hand iPhone, which comes between 10,000 to 25,000, just makes it much more affordable to own an Apple.
Totally. But what do you do for supplies, right? I mean, that's not something that you control. But what do you do? I mean, the aspiration is higher, right? The availability is lower. What do you do to settle that?
So we run, so for example, we run an exchange program for Apple
Right.
officially in India, be it their online or offline channels. So we help
Interesting.
Apple sell more new phones so that they can do better. And then on our platform, again, Apple has a huge market share.
I think Nakul, you're in a very interesting position, right? You're in that trifecta of win-win-win, right? A win for yourself, a win for the brand that you partner with, and a win for a consumer, right? And I think it's a very interesting position to be in, right? What are the next 2 years like? What is it that you are? I mean, given we've gone through COVID, right? Given that aspirationally we are the way we are, uh, we've shaped up, right? What are the next 2 years like? I'd love to understand that, right? How's the team coming together? How are you increasing your footprint, right? Is there going to be a bigger focus on digital? Physical was very key of your strategy, right? But I think what we've seen through 2020, right? I'm sure it's possibly decreased, but I'd love to understand from you, right? What are the next 2 years like? What are we going to be seeing? Are
So
we
I
going to
think,
see a bigger product portfolio as well?
so for example, phone is still the largest portfolio for us and
Right,
will remain so because of the sheer volume, right?
right,
All portfolio also include laptop, gaming consoles, smartwatches, smart speakers, right? But those are growing portfolios which will grow over time.
right,
I don't think in next 3 years I'm looking at anybody surpassing or even matching phone volumes.
right,
Uh, but what we are focusing right now is more on we work with a lot of retail partners,
right.
and retail partners really suffered in COVID because they were not digitized. So we are working, strongly on how to make them digitized,
Interesting.
from helping them manage their own accounting to inventory management. Uh, for example, before COVID, all our billing to them was offline. We had
Right,
offline centers where they were like Walmart cash and carry. So they used to come, they used to do billing, pay, and leave. We have moved everything online. So
right,
100% we have moved to a B2B commerce platform, and they just put in an order and we ship to their stores. Uh, but now to the next level, where when they receive it, that inventory should reflect in their IT system. They should have an IT system to receive
interesting.
payments, give payments, because again, a lot of them are not used to online payments, and a lot of education is being needed. There's an aspect of GST in second hand also.
Right,
A lot of them don't pay it. We are trying to educate that there's no point of doing cash transactions, and
right,
it's a very small part of your overall revenue and profit, and
right,
how being compliant is more friendly for them.
right.
So a lot of effort is being done to digitize phone retailers. We actually acquired a company 6 months ago just to help us succeed. So
Right, interesting.
we acquired a company called Unishop,
Right,
which was in the business of making POS for
interesting.
retailers. And we acquired it and rebranded it to Phone Shop. And now they only focus on digitizing phone retailers.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Nakul, we're towards the end of the conversation. Last two, I mean, how I want this conversation to go on, but last two questions, right? You've raised substantial funds, right? You've raised in some of the marquee investors. I'd love to understand your journey of doing that, right? And I want to understand the sensitivity that a founder needs, right? When you're actually going out and raising this capital, right? You've been extremely sensitive, right? I think you've had certain, principles and ethos in place right from the beginning, right? I'd love to understand from you on those aspects, right? As a founder, how do you look at this, right? How has that journey been? Uh, and there could possibly be a learning that you could, give out for many other founders in the process.
Yeah. So I think so. We've raised about 40 million USD till now,
Uh-huh.
which in today's context is not very large, but it's good enough for us.
Right,
But I think it's a very different journey to maybe other founders, because again, we did not understand venture capital, right? We
right,
didn't understand why they invested, what are the matrices they look at into, what are their end goals, kind of.
right,
Because we understand bank loans, and then bank give money, then they take the money back, there is an interest amount. This
right,
is fairly simple, right? But how does VC work? How do they make money? Those kind of aspects. So it took us for first couple of years just to understand the ecosystem, and those were the times I also met you.
Right.
And hence it was a lot of learning.
Right.
Uh, we were fortunate enough to get investors who actually, invested us not because it's a hot domain or anything, because they understood the problem, and
Right.
then how we were solving it, and they liked the solution, right? um, and this is a good point also, and then this has a bad point also, because
Right.
when you start going for fundraise, a lot of them want benchmark
Right.
in market, which is saying, okay, you're building something great, right? Who else has done it?
Right.
And you can't tell them, right? It's
Right.
a unique business model for India, because hand market in India is huge, which
Right.
may not be prevalent in US market. So I'm solving a different problem.
Right.
They don't get it.
Interesting.
That's been the biggest challenge for us.
Interesting. Nakul, my last question in the conversation, right? I have, like I said, right, I have had the opportunity of knowing you at a personal level, right? And I think one thing which has been constant across our conversation has been your emphasis on profitability, right? And I think that's how you build this enterprise, right? You built it with a lot of deftness. You built it with a lot of very, very clear focus, right? That you always wanted to gear for profitability, right? And nothing in a wrong sense, right? But I think it's important to have this ethos in place, right? I would love you to give some of the learnings, right? How many other founders, right? What's the learning for many of these founders that you would want to give out?
So I think again, it's been a learning for me also. Again, I came from a manufacturing setup, so that's why my understanding of profitability was always around, hey, we have to pay back a bank loan, and I need to make enough money to pay back the bank loan, uh, give the interest back, pay the salaries of my team, and
Right.
also make some money for myself to survive.
Right.
That's how, because we took a loan amount of exactly what we wanted. It was not
Right.
excess. There was no additional money for marketing and stuff like that. So that's where we came from. So hence our understanding was limited to that. We have
Right.
also evolved in those terms. But I think one of the most important thing still for us is, uh, basic cash flow, right?
Right.
How does cash moves in your ecosystem? Making sure that there are no creditor, debitors, how those are month on month balance,
Right.
paying taxes on time, making sure that you never owe anything to the government. Uh, and those things are always calculated in your operating profitability. So
Right.
my focus now is more on operating profitability. You don't
Right.
lose money on a transaction. That,
Interesting.
look, as a principle, I don't agree to a business which loses money on a transaction, right?
Right.
It could be that, hey, for the first 100 transaction, I will learn this thing, and then from 101, I will make sure that I don't lose money. But you
Right.
cannot be eventually ever losing money. And again, I'm not saying what I say is always right, but this is my ethos.
Right.
Uh, and overall, for building the business, your cost of HQ marketing would be greater than that, and which will solve at scale, which is fine. But your operating principles should be always basic.
Interesting. Nakul, with that, we come to the end of this conversation, right? I mean, it's almost becoming cliched, right? Because I want these conversations to keep going, right? And that's largely because there's just so much of intelligence, right, in execution. It's very difficult to capture all of that in one conversation, right? I look forward to having many more conversations with you. I have always, in the private capacity, enjoyed, our chit chats, right, on very specific topics. But I'm sure there is just so much, right? I think with what you're doing, what you've built in Cashify, the understanding of consumer is just so sharp and amazing, right? And we're going to need a lot many sessions, right, to capture all of that. And I'm sure many founders can learn from it, right? Because India is a complicated market. We operate at so many levels, right? We have such preferences. It's difficult to segment all of that, right? And I think cost of experimentation is very expensive. We are becoming an experimental we're becoming an expensive country, right? In that sense, thus it becomes important that one can learn from, you know, uh, experienced people like yourself, right? Leaders like yourself, right? Who've been through that journey, who experimented. That could just shorten the learning curve so much, right? Nakul, it was a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining in. Thank you so much for taking the time out. Loved each bit of this conversation. And like I said, right, look forward to having you with us much sooner.
Yeah. Thank you, Ashu. It was great talking to you, and it was always a pleasure.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
See you.